today we've got, well, the blue Dodge. It's here in the shop, and we're going to go ahead and install a 4x4 Posi-Lok cable kit. So, this is our Posi-Lok cable front axle engagement kit. So it gives us the cable, the front actuator housing, and a bunch of other goodies here. Basically what this does is, on Dodge pickups, in the front differential in the center of the Dana 44, there's what they call a CAD, which is a center axle disconnect. So essentially what happens is, I have another video on here about replacing the four-wheel drive actuator on one of these trucks right here. And in there you see me take the actuator off, and there's a little fork inside here that has a slip collar that locks the axles together. That's the exact same idea as what the Dodge pickup has here. The difference is how everything's actuated. So in this truck, everything's ran by vacuum lines that run down off from the intake down to the transfer case, where there is a vacuum switch, so that when you manually shift the four-wheel drive, because in this truck the transfer case has a manual shifter, the vacuum switch signals and changes it so it actually removes vacuum. I shouldn't say puts vacuum, but it removes vacuum from the actuator, causing the fork that's in here to pull across, and it slides the collar onto the two axles and locks them together. When I take the housing off the truck here, I'll show you a little bit better how that works. First things first, I'm not above reading instructions. I've read through it a couple times here just to make sure that there wasn't any surprises. As you can see, in this picture here, that's the factory one. I actually forgot I had one kicking around here in the shop that I had for a spare. So these are your vacuum lines, and this is the line that goes down. So this goes to the vacuum switch, these 4 pins. Right? And then these two here are the output, and these will go to the steel lines that are on the frame rail of the truck. Now, steel lines always rot out on these trucks, and then you lose four-wheel drive. And these two would go up to the intake manifold. So I'll throw those over there the way. And then this is the other end that would be down at the differential. So there's your 2 vacuum lines coming from the transfer case, running down the frame rail, and then this would connect onto the other end of the steel lines. This is the shield that actually goes on the bottom of the differential. But this is the actual actuator. So this is the switch for the dash to turn the light on for four-wheel drive. And this is the actuator pot, and I believe it sits like... No, it sits like this. So it sits like this on the truck. So there's your actuator. Alright, so inside here, as you can see, this one's not in the nicest of shape, but here's your fork. If I can get the damn thing to sit flat. Okay, so here's the fork. So what happens is, this little sucker here would slide out, right? You can see the shaft in there. And I would lock the collar. Right? So that's what actuates the four-wheel drive on these trucks. Just this fork. And I'll show you the collar inside the diff here. So, basically we are eliminating all of the vacuum portion of this and replacing it with a steel cable that will run up to, well, just underneath the dash, basically. We can move up to the cab here, and first thing I want you to do is you'll see on your dash panel, there's a screw right there, which in my case, it's just below my trailer brake controller. So I'll take that screw out, put the bracket on, but you've got to open it up to 5/16, it says. I'm pretty sure mine's already that big because I had to put self-tappers in it because when I got the truck, they had screwed up everything underneath the dash from it being a snow plow. But anyway, as you can see, we're going to take our template, which is already folded, and we're going to hang it so we can drill our hole through the firewall. Ugh. And then we'll go ahead and continue to follow our instructions. So at this point, I removed the screw I had in there holding the dash pan on. And I've taken and drilled it out to 5/16. And I've got a 1/2-inch socket and a 1/2-inch wrench. And I'm going to put the bracket on there. It's going to take 2 hands, so let me do that. So just like it says on the instructions here, I laid out my template and I marked and I hacked out a section of the insulation, which I apologize. It's hard to get a freaking light in here along with a camera. So there's a chunk of our insulation out, and I'm going to mark the hole here and then drill it, and then we'll put the grommet in it. Now that's going to be an 11/16 hole, just so you know. You're going to want to probably double check on the other side just to make sure there's no you know, wire harness or anything, because drilling into wire harnesses is never a good time. I've had to fix a few because I'm stupid like that. Okay, our next step after we go ahead and make a gaping hole in our firewall is to go ahead and take this nut and washer off here, and then we're going to take this cable and we're going to feed it through the bracket that, if the camera ever focuses, is right there. And then we're going to put our nut and washer back on, and then we got to grommet stuff in the firewall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the cable in place, and then I'll show you the hole and putting the grommet in. Okay, so I moved the bracket over because I didn't like where it was. I didn't like how close it put the cable to the accelerator pedal. And I also didn't like the fact that I had to move my trailer brake controller, or would have. So I moved mine over a little bit so it sits on the bottom of here. And I left myself enough space I can still get to my OBD2 connector back here. So the choice for that's up to you, right? You can put it wherever you want. At the end of the day, it's your truck, right? So you might as well do what you want with it. So you can see we got our gaping hole still in the firewall. They give us this grommet here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there, and then we can go under the truck. Okay, so there's our 4-wheel drive actuator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug the light. And I'm going to unbolt it. And we'll pop it off there and put it on the bench, and I'll show you how I sort of fixed it. Okay, so with it removed, that's what we're looking at. So there's our collar, and I'm gonna try and squeeze under here the best I can. All right, as you can see, this collar just slides. And what it does is it locks the 2 axles together, because right now that would be locked. So now it's in 4-wheel drive. So there's 2-wheel drive. It unlocks this axle, so this axle and this one can freewheel at different speeds, which makes turning a little easier. And then there you go, boom, 4-wheel drive. Okay, so here is the actuator removed from the truck, and this is how I had it locked to keep the truck so that the axles were locked and I had 4-wheel drive. put a hose clamp over top of the shaft that runs through here so that the fork would stay down here, right? By doing that, it held the coupler inside in the four-wheel drive position. I don't recommend doing that. I can tell you for sure that it definitely accelerated the wear in the front universal joints that are on the axle ends, and as well as the universal joints that are in the front drive shaft. It tore up U-joints like a bugger. So unless you're using the truck just for snow plowing or something like that, don't do that. I regret doing it, that's for sure. So our next step here, what we have to do is actually kind of disassemble this actuator, because we need this fork. That fork has to get used in that housing there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray off everything here with brake cleaner, because there's nothing better than fresh 80-90 fluid, and clear some crap off the bench here that doesn't need to be here, and we'll get that fork out of there in a second. Okay, to disassemble the actuator is actually not that hard. And I'm not just saying that because I've taken them apart before. So the first thing you do is you're going to take the four-wheel drive switch off the end of it here, which it's a 7/8, right? So it's kind of neat, or at least I think it is. All it has here on the switch is just a pintle, and when it gets pushed out by the actuator, that's all it does. It just pushes it in and grounds it out. Turn the light on the dashboard. I don't know. I thought that was interesting anyway. So inside here, there's a big clip on the side of the actuator. Where's a light? There we go. Right there. That's got to come off. And if you look down in here, you'll see there's another one on this side of the fork. That's got to come off. And then if we slide our fork back out of the way here, there's one on this side that also has to come off. So we'll get them out of there. Okay, so truth be told, by the time I got this freaking fork out, I went, full, caveman. At the end of the day, I wasn't hurting anything anyway. That was all rotten. And it's not going back on the truck anyway. So I just cut it and then pulled it out because I couldn't get the big E clip to come out, which is what retains the whole vacuum diaphragm on there. And all this crap is all going in the garbage. The only thing we're going to keep is the vent nipple, but other than that, it's all garbage. Okay, so with everything assembled on the top side, this is what it looks like. Now you're saying, well, Nick, what about the fork? How do we get the fork back in there? Well, we got to go under the truck. Okay, so there's our picture of what we're going to do here. So we're going to take our cable end, and it's going to go in there. And we're going to put all this crap together. Okay, so to adjust it is pretty straightforward. So it's got a jam nut. And what you basically do is, it tells you straight up in the instructions here. With the E-clips and everything on, you go up top and you pull the actuator cable. And you adjust it until the fork bottoms out here, because once it bottoms out, it means that that collar is going to be pulled across and the four-wheel drive is going to be actuated. So with that, our next thing is we're going to put a little silicone and put the gasket on, and then put the actuator on, our new one. I like to use the gray oil resistant silicone personally, but I mean, you can use whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's it installed. So I went up in the cab there and I pushed it in, and what you'll see is I rotate this tire around, the drive shaft doesn't turn. Why? Because it's in two-wheel drive right now. So this axle's unlocked. So what I'll do is I'll go up in the cab and I'll actuate. Okay, give it a push in. We'll pull it out. Okay. Now I want to rotate this tire. Rotates my drive shaft. The truck's now in four-wheel drive. Right? Means that we have it properly adjusted. And our Posi-Lok cable kit works. So the next thing we're going to do is I'll tether this cable up a little better. So it's going to be out of the way of the drive shaft and the exhaust and any moving parts. And then we're going to do the wiring. Okay, so what I quickly learned is, according to the instructions, if your truck has the CAD system with the switch, it doesn't matter which wire you put where on the new switch they provide. One thing I will suggest, I put my own heat shrink terminals on here because the terminals they provided were crap. So here's where I ended up routing the cable up top here. And I did that, of course, to keep it from winding up on top of anything, because you can see it comes through the firewall back here. So what I didn't want it to do is get anywhere near my exhaust manifolds or near my steering shaft. So that's what we ended up doing with it. You of course can do whatever makes you happy, but that's what I did.